it's Allison. Welcome back to my channel and a really fun video for today. If you like shimmer powders, then hopefully you will have as much fun watching this as I did making it. We're going to be playing with Lindy's Gang Magicals today, and here you can see some of the cards that I'm going to finish with some of these backgrounds, but today we're going to focus on making the backgrounds and just having fun. So I mentioned in a previous video where I played with some Nouveau shimmer powders that I had purchased some Lindy's Gang powders, and here they are. These are called Magicals, and this is the Tea and Crumpets set. Although I did purchase all of these little bottles separately. You can buy them as a set or separately. It is a set of 12. And if you're familiar with Lindy's Gang Magicals, but you're not familiar with these shaker jars, they do have these little jars available now. The Magicals that I had seen in the past come in these little flat jars. So I was really excited to see these jars. These have about, I would say, 50% more powder in them than the flat jars do. And they're little shakers. And again, I've only played with Nouveau shimmer powders previous to this, and I like that the Nouveau powders are in bottles. So I was excited to see these. And here you can see the little shaker, like a little sifter top. And here I'm just going to show you really quick one of the colors. This was one of the colors I really wanted to test out. So I grabbed an embossing folder, and this is the Dunka Biscuit blue-green color. And that is just one color there. Look at all of the variation you get with just that one powder. So I did that off camera, but I just wanted to show you that. Now, to play with shimmer powders, I use just a plastic scrapbook case. I'll link to one just like this in the supply list below, but it's just, a little box you keep scrapbook paper in. And I like to use this. It just makes cleanup a lot easier. And here I'm just showing you that you need a spray bottle, and I have some paper towels handy. I like containing the Magicals in this plastic bin, and you'll see why in a bit. All right, we're going to jump in with this embossing folder from Spellbinders. This is a new embossing folder. And I'm going to have the names of the powders up at the top and the names of all the products at the top. But you'll see that I am going to play with these powders the same way I've always played with my Nouveau shimmer powders. And that is to sprinkle the powders onto a dry piece of paper. And in this case, it's an embossed piece of watercolor paper. This is Canson XL watercolor paper. This is the paper I've always used with my Nouveaux, so of course I just wanted to see, I wanted to just do everything the same with these new Magicals as I've always done in the past. So here's another embossing folder, and I really was trying to pick embossing folders that would create little nooks and crannies for the Magicals to settle in. I didn't heat emboss any of these panels with embossing powder, so this isn't the resist technique. This is just plain paper, just embossed with the embossing folders. And again, the names of the powders are at the top, and I'm just spraying water on the panel and letting the Magicals do their thing. And every once in a while, you'll see me come in and sop up water off the sides. But, just playing with these colors, I was very excited to get new colors. It's partly why I wanted to try the Magicals. Just having fun. All right, here is the floating foliage embossing folder from Altenew. This is an older folder. And I had taken some shabby shutters, and I'm just showing you here, and rubbed it on the raised edge of the embossing folder. And then once the embossed panel came out, I used this distressed embossing glaze. This is Twisted Citron, and sprinkled that over the distress oxide and then heat embossed it. So now I'm coming in with this one color of Magicals. And so this is more of a resist technique because it's going to resist where that embossing glaze is. And this was kind of a cool result here. Now, most of the panels that you'll see, I was mixing colors. This particular one, I just used that one color. And you know me, I love turquoise. So it was interesting when I was editing this video how often I saw myself reaching for the turquoise colored ink. Now, here's why I like to contain everything in this plastic box, because now I can take a plain piece of watercolor paper and sop up some of that color. And you'll see me every once in a while bringing that paper back in to sop up new color. All right, here's another embossing folder, and we're going to be playing with all of the colors in this set. Again, there were 12 colors in this particular set, and I'm going to play with all of them. And again, I do like to mix my colors, so most panels have at least 2 colors on them. Now, you'll see me coming in with my fingers sometimes. That's if there's like a clump of powder that I see that hasn't, when I spray it with water and it hasn't really moved, I'll take my finger and kind of spread that clump of powder around. All right, here is a resist technique going on. I have black watercolor paper that I embossed with gold embossing powder and this cling stamp. So I really have never tried shimmer powders on black paper before, so I wanted to see what would happen. And in the past, most of the time when I've played with shimmer powders, it's doing this emboss resist technique where you just stamp with a cling stamp and then heat emboss with, usually I do it on white paper, so I'm embossing with either clear or white embossing powder. And it's still my favorite way of using shimmer powders. So I'm just going to stop and show you this. I think it's pretty cool that you can do it on black paper. All right, here's a die. It's just a cover plate die. Again, no heat embossing on here. But I love this die and I've been wanting to use it. This is the first time I'm using it. So I'm just going to combine a few different colors on here. And you'll see the colors at the top of the screen again. I think some of these names are just so clever. I think it'd be so fun to be one of those people that gets to name products. So I love this panel. I love blues and greens, of course. So this was one of my favorites. Now, I would say that a lot of these colors are, I wouldn't call them bright colors. They're muted, but they're still vivid. It's hard to explain. They're gorgeous colors, but they're not like bright citron or anything like that. So I am looking forward to getting those type colors. These are they're beautiful, muted, but still vivid colors. All right, this color is called Pinkies Up Pink, but you'll see once I spray it with water, it's going to look a little orange. It's definitely more of a salmon color. And I love what it does on this woven embossing folder. Now again, I don't normally use shimmer powders on just embossed panels like this. I like to use the emboss resist technique. So you'll see me come in later and try to do some different things. This is the Lush Leaves Die from Birch Press Design. And I just decided to cut, this is watercolor paper. So I cut this out of watercolor paper and I'm just going to color this. And I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning, this is part 1 of this video series, and part 2 I will show you some finished cards that we're going to make from these backgrounds, and I'll show you some of the process of making those cards, but that leaf is going to go on one of the finished cards. All right, here I am bringing back one of the panels that I did before, and I tend to come back to panels once they've dried. If they're too light, I'll come back in with more color. Not always, but sometimes. So here I just wanted to come in and add more color to this. Now I will say that in comparing the Magicals to the Nouveau Shimmer powders, in case you're curious, I find that these dry a little bit darker. So I guess I'm used to the Nouveau Shimmer powders drying back a little bit. They dry a little bit lighter than what they look like when you set them down to dry. So here, look at this panel. I'm going to come in with the Spill the Tea Teal again. This is the darker color that's in that lower corner. And this is going to look super cool at first. Like, doesn't that look like stained glass? I was so excited when I saw this. I'm going to just come fill in a little bit at the bottom. But you'll see later on it dried back like a lot darker than I expected. So I don't know. Maybe next time if I really love a result I get, I might try heat setting it. I'm not sure. So here's another one. I'm coming in with this purple color, and not a normal combination I would go for, but I thought it was really cool. And I really liked this result here. But again, you'll see later on it dried a lot darker than it looks here. So leave me a comment if you have experience with Magicals and you notice that maybe they dry a little bit darker. I don't know. All right, these are Crumpet Crumbs. This is the yellow color, and I'm just coming back in with more of that yellow color. This is the Because embossing folder from Spellbinder. So there's little bees on there, and it's a really cool embossing folder. And as with all Spellbinders embossing folders, it's I think 5.5 by 8 or 5 by 8, something like that. So you can make larger scale cards with these embossing folders, which I love. So I just thought it would be cool to combine some blues and the yellows on this panel. And as of the time that I'm making this first video, I have not finished this card yet. Like, I haven't decided what I'm doing with this panel yet. What I love about Magicals or any shimmer powders is just doing what I'm doing right now. Making a bunch of backgrounds, and then I'll have a bunch of backgrounds in my stash to pull out. There's days where maybe you aren't feeling a lot of mojo, or you need to make a quick card, and you have all these beautiful backgrounds in your stash that you can just pull out and make a quick card. So that's one of the things I really love about shimmer powders. All right, here's one of the panels where I had just been, previously to this, I was just mopping excess color up from the plastic bin. And now I'm just adding a little bit more color to it. So that I would call these more free-form backgrounds. They're not embossed. There's not an emboss resist technique. It's just getting color onto the panel. And again, just to have another background to use. And so here's another background that I had started by just mopping up excess colors. So I'm just going to add some more color to this. And I love this one. And you'll see once it dries, you can really just get layer upon layer. You'll see the previous layers are still there. So even coming in with water again is not going to get rid of some of that stuff in the background, which I think is pretty cool. So there's that background. Really pretty. All right, let's do some emboss resist techniques. This is the giant Firework stencil from Simon Says Stamp. And I'm going to place a piece of watercolor paper on my grip mat, and I'm going to use some anti-static powder because I am going to use embossing powder on this, and I don't want it to get anywhere other than where I'm putting my embossing ink. So I'm going to put my stencil onto my grip mat. And if you watched my previous shimmer powder video, I think it was maybe last month, I used a paper pouncer from Picket Studios. And I use that with embossing ink or white pigment ink. I like pouncing those types of ink into stencils more than I do ink blending. And so I just showed you the little pint-sized paper pouncers that they've now come out with. And I just bought these recently. This is my first time using them. And I'm using my Wow embossing pad. This is just really juicy ink pad. And I'm going to pounce the embossing ink into the openings of this stencil, because what I want to do is heat emboss this design. And so it's just really easy to use these pouncers. I don't know what it is about. Maybe you use regular blending tools with your embossing ink or white pigment ink. I just find it's easier for me to pounce it in. I just don't find that it blends very well. So I'm just going to put, this is either white embossing powder or clear embossing powder. Either one works just fine. And I'm going to heat set it with my heat tool. And now I can play with some shimmer powders, and the shimmer powders are going to resist anywhere that the embossed pattern is. So I'm using, here's that Pinkies Up Pink again, which again is more of that salmon color, and I think I'm going to come in with a little bit of yellow. And now I'm coming in with my spray bottle, and this is why I love magicals or any shimmer powders. I just love seeing that design come to life when you put the color on. And when I do an emboss technique and there's large areas of embossing ink, I do try to come in with my paper towel and get some of the liquid off of it, because it bubbles up on top of the embossed pattern, which is fine. But if I can get some of it off there, I do try to do that. When it's really thin lines, and when the stamp or whatever has thin lines, you don't really need to worry about that. All right, here is one of the panels that we did earlier, and I've taken the same panel, and now I did actually add some embossing ink to it. I just took a brayer, and I'm just showing you what I did. I took a brayer with embossing ink, and then I added white or clear embossing powder and heat set it. So now you're going to see the difference between using just a regular embossing panel or regular embossed panel and then a heat embossed panel. So once I've sprayed it, you're going to see the big difference. So you just keep all of that embossed pattern because the color is going to resist it. Anywhere where that embossing powder was heat set, the color is going to resist it. So it's just such a different look. And why did I not do this at the beginning? I really just wanted to play. And, you know, I do have a lot of embossing folders that, and by the way, all of the embossing folders in this video are 3D embossing folders. So you really get all those different layers of dimension. So I really was trying to pick ones that where the magicals would settle into little nooks and crannies. Here's that spun glass embossing folder again, and this second panel I did use heat embossing with it, so we're going to get a much different look here. And you'll see when I add the water, where I had added the embossing powder, you'll see that all the water is kind of starting to bubble up on top of this design. So I'm coming in with my paper towel and just sopping it up because, I mean, it was just all bubbled up on top. It wasn't really gonna dry well. So I'm just gonna be adding more colors and again, just sopping up some of the color. Now you can't really see it very well, but there is a lot of dimension here. There's this little pattern, the spun glass pattern. And even though I'm sopping some of it up with my paper towel, there's this pattern there. It's hard to describe, but hopefully you can see part of it, and it is really cool looking. But look at that difference. Oh, and that was the one that I said got so much darker. That spun glass original one that I did. Now here on this stencil design, there was this just area on the right hand side that it wasn't very defined, so I was just adding more color to it, and I think it looks a lot better. It just kind of filled out that pattern. I think this is really cool looking. All right, here are all the backgrounds that I made. Here's that original one that I did off camera, and I actually did turn it over and added some color, and this is actually the side that I'm going to use to make a card. And here's the one that I had prepared with the Distress embossing glaze first, and there's the stencil design. Here are the two that I made with that spun glass folder. And again, see how much darker that looks than when I had originally done it, that woven purple one. Now this one I didn't do on camera. This is the Sparkles panel die from Waffle Flower. This was new for February, and you can see those fun holes in the panel that the die creates. Here's that Because folder from Spellbinders. And here's this beautiful Florence Plate. And then here are the two that were just kind of freeform that I was mopping up extra colors from that plastic bin. And then here are the two that I made with the Sparkling Facets embossing folder. And there's the one on the black watercolor paper with the Resist technique. Okay, so this one, I wasn't crazy about how this looked because it just got too dark and you lost the definition of the embossing folder. So I have this little sanding block, and I am just sanding the raised edges, and it takes, you know, the shimmer powder off those edges, and I think it's a much cooler look than it was before. So I'm going to do it to this guy as well, and it's just really going to soften it up. Again, this dried a lot darker than I had expected it to, so I think this really added a lot to it by sanding off some of it. I love these sanding blocks. I use these a lot off camera. All right, here are all of my backgrounds that I made, and again, next time, hopefully in 2 days, I will have a video showing how I'm going to make some of these backgrounds into cards. I will have a link below to Lindy's gang website, and I will have a discount code. Now, you just enter the code at checkout and you get 10% off your order. That's just a special code that they sent me. I did purchase all of these powders myself. They didn't send these to me. And again, this is my first experience with magicals, so I will be playing with these obviously a lot in the future, and we'll be trying new techniques. So what I did in this video is nothing earth-shattering, but I had fun because it is one of my favorite things to do, and it is, I must warn you, very addicting because I just kept wanting to make more and more and more. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was a longer one, and I really hope you tune in next time to see me make some cards from some of these backgrounds. Again, I hope to have that out in a couple days. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. If you liked this video, give me a thumbs up, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.